He was walking toward the gate, boarding pass in hand. Flight called. Then John Wayne saw a face in the distance, and everything changed. He stopped. He turned back. And he walked toward that soldier. Los Angeles International Airport. November 1974. Gate 7. An American Airlines flight to Denver boarding in 15 minutes. John Wayne was 67 years old. Tired. His left lung had been removed the year before. Cancer, the price of a lifetime of cigarettes, and the radioactive dirt he'd breathed filming The Conqueror in Utah. He moved slower now. Breathed harder. But he was still John Wayne. Still the Duke. Still the man everyone recognized. People noticed him the moment he entered the terminal. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the waiting areas. A few brave souls approached for autographs. Wayne signed them with his usual gruff courtesy, pen moving across paper in that distinctive scrawl, offering brief smiles before moving on. He was traveling alone. No entourage. No handlers. Just a man with a leather overnight bag and a boarding pass, heading to Denver for a charity event supporting Vietnam veterans. One speech. One dinner. Back home the next day. He'd checked his bag at the counter. Walked through security, what little security existed in 1974. Made his way down the concourse toward Gate 7, his boots clicking on the polished floor, his shadow long under the fluorescent lights. The gate was in sight. The attendant was making the boarding call. First-class passengers. That was him. He could already see the jetway. 10 more steps and he'd be at the podium, handing over his pass, disappearing into the aircraft and away from the stairs. He took 3 of those steps. Then he saw the soldier. 30 feet away. Sitting in a wheelchair beside a support pillar. Army dress greens. Medals on his chest catching the terminal lights. Head down. Hands folded in his lap. A small duffel bag on the floor beside the wheelchair. Alone. Completely alone. Wayne stopped walking. His hand tightened on the boarding pass. His eyes fixed on that distant figure. The gate attendant called out again. Final boarding call for first-class passengers. Wayne didn't move. He was staring at the soldier. At the slumped shoulders. At the way no one walking past even glanced at the young man. At the isolation that seemed to radiate from that wheelchair like cold air. Wayne didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He turned. Fully. His back to the gate. His face toward the soldier. And then John Wayne started walking. Not toward his flight. Toward that wheelchair. The few people who noticed this change in direction looked confused. The gate attendant glanced up, saw Wayne walking away, and called out uncertainly. Mr. Wayne? We're boarding your section now. Wayne raised one hand without turning around. A simple gesture. Wait. He crossed the distance slowly. Each step deliberate. His breathing labored, that missing lung making everything harder, but his face set with purpose. The young soldier hadn't moved. Hadn't looked up. He sat in his wheelchair with the practiced stillness of someone who had learned to make himself invisible. His uniform was crisp. His shoes were polished. But his posture spoke of defeat. Wayne stopped directly in front of the wheelchair. Close enough that his shadow fell across the soldier's lap. For a long moment neither man moved. The terminal sounds continued around them, announcements, conversations, rolling luggage, crying children. But in that small space between John Wayne and the soldier, there was only silence. Finally, the young man looked up. His face was thin. Too thin. Cheekbones sharp beneath pale skin. Eyes that had seen things they shouldn't have seen. He couldn't have been more than 28, but he looked older. Worn down. His gaze met Wayne's with the wariness of someone who had stopped expecting kindness. Wayne saw the recognition flicker across the soldier's face. Everyone knew John Wayne. Even broken soldiers in airport wheelchairs. Sir? The soldier said quietly, and started to straighten up in his chair, some muscle memory of military bearing trying to assert itself. Wayne held up his hand again. "Don't," he said, his voice that familiar gravelly rumble. "Don't do that. I should be standing straighter for you." The soldier's eyes widened slightly. Confusion mixed with something else. Something that looked like it might have been hope once, before hope got beaten out of him. Wayne glanced down at the wheelchair. At the soldier's legs, covered by the uniform trousers. At the way the young man's hands rested on the armrests with the casual familiarity of someone who'd been sitting there a long time. "What's your name, son?" Wayne asked. "Corporal James Sullivan, sir. 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines." "Where were you, James?" "Khe Sanh. And then, other places." Sullivan's voice was flat. Reciting facts. "Got hit in 68. Been home since 69. Wayne did the math in his head. 6 years? This young man had been in that wheelchair for 6 years. "You waiting for someone?" Wayne asked, though he already knew the answer from the posture, from the solitude, from everything about this scene. Sullivan shook his head. "No, sir. Just waiting for my connection. Flight to Portland. My sister lives there. She's expecting me. Eventually." "Eventually," Wayne repeated. He looked at the empty seats surrounding the wheelchair. At the travelers who walked past without seeing. At the way this decorated Marine had been left alone in the middle of a crowded terminal. Something in Wayne's chest tightened. That old familiar feeling. The one he'd carried for 3 decades. The weight that never quite went away. Away from the cameras, Wayne made a choice no one expected. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what John Wayne carried with him every day since 1942. Guilt. Not the performative guilt of someone seeking sympathy. The deep, corrosive guilt of a man who had built an empire playing soldiers while real soldiers died. John Wayne never served. When World War II broke out, he was 34 years old. Married. 4 children. A rising star in Hollywood. Republic Pictures held his contract and fought to keep him making movies. The draft board gave him a 3A classification, deferred due to family dependency. He could have fought it. Other actors did. Jimmy Stewart flew bombing missions. Clark Gable enlisted. Henry Fonda served in the Navy. But Wayne stayed in Hollywood. He made war movies. He played heroes. He became the face of American fighting spirit while never firing a real shot. And it ate at him. Every time he put on a uniform for a film, he felt like a fraud. Every time someone thanked him for his service, confusing the man with the roles, he felt the knife twist deeper. Every time he visited a VA hospital and saw real wounded men, real amputees, real Marines who had actually been there, he wanted to disappear into the ground. In the 1960s, he tried to make up for it. He visited troops in Vietnam. He made the Green Berets, pouring his own money into a film supporting soldiers when Hollywood had turned against the war. He spoke at veterans events. He donated to military charities. But none of it erased the fundamental truth. John Wayne was a man who played war while others fought it. And now, in November 1974, standing in an airport terminal looking down at Corporal James Sullivan, all that guilt came rushing back with crushing force. This young Marine had given his legs at Khe Sanh, had been shattered in service of his country. And here he sat, alone in a wheelchair, while people rushed past to catch flights and visit families and live the lives his sacrifice had helped protect. Wayne made his decision. He lowered himself slowly into the orange plastic chair beside Sullivan's wheelchair. His knees protested. His back ached. His missing lung made the simple act of sitting feel like a marathon. But he sat. Sullivan looked over, startled. "Mr. Wayne, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," Wayne interrupted. "But I'm going to." "What time's your flight to Portland?" Sullivan glanced at his watch. "Not for another 3 hours. I got here early. Didn't have anywhere else to be." 3 hours, Wayne repeated. He pulled the boarding pass from his pocket, the pass for the flight to Denver that was probably boarding its final passengers right now, and looked at it for a long moment. Then he tore it in half. Sullivan's eyes went wide. "Sir, your flight." "I'll catch the next one," Wayne said simply. "It's not important." He tucked the torn boarding pass into his jacket pocket and turned to face Sullivan fully. "Tell me about Khe Sanh. Subscribe and leave a comment. Because the most important part of this story is still unfolding." For the next 2 hours and 40 minutes, John Wayne sat in that orange airport chair and listened. Sullivan talked. Slowly at first, haltingly, the words of someone who had kept most of it locked away for 6 years. But Wayne didn't interrupt. Didn't try to relate it to his movies. Didn't offer platitudes or empty thank yous. He just listened. Sullivan told him about the siege. About the artillery. About watching friends die. About the moment the mortar round landed and he woke up 3 days later in a field hospital, looking down at legs that would never work again. He told Wayne about coming home. About the protesters who spat at him in San Francisco. About the girl who'd promised to wait but couldn't. About learning to navigate a world designed for people who could walk. About the VA hospital that processed him like paperwork. About his parents who tried but couldn't quite look him in the eye anymore. "Sometimes," Sullivan said quietly, staring at his hands, "I think the hardest part isn't the chair. It's that nobody sees you anymore. You're just furniture. Something to look past on the way to somewhere else." Wayne felt something crack in his chest. This was it. This was the thing he'd feared every time he put on a costume uniform. That real soldiers would come home to nothing. That their sacrifice would be absorbed and forgotten. That they would sit alone in wheelchairs while the country moved on. "I see you," Wayne said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I want you to know something, James. I've spent my whole career playing men like you. Pretending to be brave. Pretending to sacrifice. But I never did any of it. Not really." Sullivan looked at him, confused. "Sir, you—" "I never served," Wayne continued. "World War II, I stayed home and made movies while men like you fought. And I've carried that my whole life. Every uniform I put on for a camera, I feel like a liar. Because you're the real thing. You did it. You paid the price. And the least I can do is sit here and make sure you're not alone." Sullivan's eyes were wet. "You don't understand, Mr. Wayne. When I was over there, in the mud, scared out of my mind, we'd talk about your movies. About you. You made us believe we could be that tough. That strong. You gave us something to hold on to." "Then I owe you more than I can ever repay," Wayne said quietly. They sat together until the boarding call for Sullivan's Portland flight echoed through the terminal. Wayne stood first, his knees cracking, and reached down to shake Sullivan's hand. But instead of just shaking, Wayne reached into his jacket and pulled out something small. A silver money clip shaped like a cavalry insignia. He'd carried it for 20 years. A gift from the set of She Wore a Yellow Ribbon. "I want you to have this," Wayne said, pressing it into Sullivan's palm. Sullivan tried to hand it back. "I can't." "You can. And you will." Wayne's grip was firm. "Every time you look at it, I want you to remember, you're not invisible. You're not forgotten. And you're not alone." But what followed would stay with everyone who witnessed it, forever. Wayne didn't just walk away after that. He wheeled Sullivan to his gate personally. Pushed the wheelchair himself, breathing hard with the effort, ignoring his own pain. When they reached the gate, he waited until Sullivan boarded. He watched the attendants help transfer him to his seat. He stood at the window until the plane pushed back from the gate. Other travelers recognized what was happening. A small crowd gathered at a respectful distance, watching John Wayne stand at the gate window until Sullivan's plane disappeared into the sky. Then Wayne turned around. He walked slowly back through the terminal to the ticket counter and bought a seat on the next flight to Denver. 4 hours later, he sat in the same orange chair where he'd listened to Sullivan's story. And he waited. People approached him during those 4 hours. Fans wanting autographs. Wayne signed everyone. But he also asked each person the same question. Do you know a veteran? If they said yes, Wayne would nod. Make sure they're not sitting alone somewhere. Make sure they know someone sees them. When Wayne finally boarded his flight to Denver that night, he was 5 hours late for the charity dinner. He walked onto the stage, gave his speech about supporting Vietnam veterans, and never mentioned what had happened at the airport. That wasn't the point. The point had been Sullivan. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived at Wayne's ranch. It was from Sullivan's sister in Portland. She wrote that her brother had arrived different somehow. He was talking more. Smiling. He'd started going to the VA hospital to visit other veterans in wheelchairs. He carried a silver cavalry money clip with him everywhere. John Wayne kept that letter in his desk drawer. When he died in 1979, his family found it there. Next to it was a torn boarding pass from an American Airlines flight to Denver he never took. The choice had been simple. Get on a plane, or sit with someone who needed not to be invisible. Wayne made the right choice. He always did when it mattered.